Welcome back to our explainer on the book Perverting Our Reproductive Nature. Today, we're jumping right into a really pivotal section titled Cultural Shifts and Their Consequences. We're going to see exactly how the author ties all these huge demographic trends together. So let's just dive right in. For decades, the dominant narrative, the one we've literally all heard over and over, was that we need to fear overpopulation, right? That the world simply has too many people and it's unsustainable. But the author completely flips this script. What if the real threat is actually a world without children? The book argues that when societies stop reproducing, they essentially die in silence. So, rather than a population explosion, the text claims we're facing the silent catastrophe of depopulation. And there's a really vital distinction to make here. When we hear the phrase falling birth rates, we usually picture families just deciding to have, say, one kid instead of three. But the text points out that this demographic collapse isn't primarily about smaller families. It's because millions of people are having no children at all. It's a shift from reduction straight to absolute zero for an entire generation.
To really grasp how we got here, the author asks us to look back at the groundwork laid out in earlier sections of the book. This didn't just happen overnight, you know. First, you had hormonal birth control separating intimacy from biological consequences. Then, pornography stepped in and separated sexual desire from actual, real-life relationships. And finally, dating apps basically gamified romance, turning human connection into a swipe-based marketplace. Step by step, separating intimacy from biological reality created the behavioral foundation for today's crisis.
Here's where it gets really interesting. The author argues that this massive trend toward childlessness isn't born out of individual malice or some sudden collective wave of selfishness. We didn't just consciously decide to stop reproducing, rather, we were trained not to. Modern society has kind of rewritten the script to worship personal autonomy, career climbing, and consumer experiences over the sacrifice it inherently takes to raise a family. The culture shifted and our life choices just naturally followed along. The book actually cites researcher Stephen Shaw's work on the birth gap to highlight a pretty heartbreaking reality. Most of these individuals still really want children. They dream of having families, but they delay starting them until their biological window simply closes. They wait for the absolute perfect time, the perfect financial setup, the perfect career, and because of that endless delay, they end up unintentionally childless.
So why the huge delay? Well, the author points to three massive competing pressures young adults are facing today. First, there's careerism, where professional milestones are put on a pedestal above everything else. Then, you've got skyrocketing costs of living, especially housing and childcare, which makes starting a family feel totally out of reach financially. And third, there's this cultural drift that just prioritizes having individual experiences over settling down.
The real tragedy, as the book frames it, is that a lot of these folks never actually made a conscious choice to remain childless. Life just moved way faster than they realized. The opportunity faded while they were busy getting ready. The cultural script told them they had all the time in the world but completely glossed over the harsh reality that biology doesn't really care about our modern timelines, and fertility windows close a lot more quickly than we'd like to admit.
Now, this demographic shift doesn't just stop at personal tragedy, it balloons into a civilizational one with some massive political consequences. The author makes the case that as people age without a family support network, no kids or grandkids to help take care of them, they inevitably become highly dependent on government bureaucracy. Basically, when the family unit shrinks or breaks down, the state has to step in as the ultimate caretaker.
And the author draws a really stark contrast here. Picture a family-centric society. It's independent, it's incredibly resilient, and it's deeply bound by generational lineage. Now contrast that with an isolated society. You have atomized individuals who, because they lack family, end up trading their personal freedoms for state-provided stability. The argument here is that you simply cannot maintain a truly free society if its foundational unit of independence, the family, is completely hollowed out.
Building on that idea of state dependency, the book issues a pretty heavy warning. The text argues that a lonely, isolated population is actually the perfect population for totalitarianism. Think about it. A lonely populace doesn't really organize or resist. It just clings to the hand that feeds it. So, an atomized population makes itself highly susceptible to control, where the state demands compliance in exchange for comfort and basic care. To back this up, the author points to some real-time examples of what they call a managed decline of freedom. According to the book, any resistance to the state's moral vision gets reframed as a dangerous rebellion.
The text highlights how parents advocating for their kids are sometimes labeled as domestic threats, traditional families are critiqued as oppressive, falling birth rates are actually spun as environmental progress, and faith communities end up getting marginalized. For the author, these are all giant red flags of a culture dismantling its own foundations. Okay, so the book then shifts gears from the political side to what the author describes as a drastic biological consequence. The argument here is that alongside all this cultural drift, there's literally a chemical war being waged on the human body. In the wild part, the author claims we are environmentally sterilizing ourselves without even realizing it's happening. The text breaks down this massive hidden environmental issue step by step. It starts when synthetic hormones, specifically the ones from hormonal birth control, are consumed. But they don't just magically disappear. They get excreted, they completely bypass municipal wastewater treatment plants that were never designed to filter them out in the first place, and then those endocrine disruptors flow straight into our rivers and drinking reservoirs. And the result of all this? According to the text, the prolonged exposure to these endocrine disruptors has resulted in a devastating biological fallout. We're talking about collapsing sperm counts on a global scale, soaring infertility rates among young couples, the onset of early puberty, and even the feminization of male biological traits. It's a mass-scale environmental issue directly affecting human biology. It's a really dark irony that the author highlights here. The very medical technologies that were championed in the 20th century as the ultimate tools for personal liberation, the ones that let us separate sex from consequence, have essentially become the literal agents of mass human sterilization. It's this cyclical trap where our attempts to outsmart nature have ultimately compromised our biological future. This cascade effect perfectly illustrates the book's overarching thesis. It's been building quietly for decades. In the 1960s, the pills separated sex from consequence. By the 2010s, digital algorithms, dating apps, and porn isolated individuals. Now in the 2020s, we are seeing the birth gap trigger real demographic decline. And all of this points toward a future of totalitarian dependency and environmental sterilization. The author views this as a true crisis of civilizational survival. So you're probably asking, is there a way out of this? Well, the author insists that passing new legislation or throwing economic incentives at the problem just isn't going to cut it. To actually reverse this trend, the book argues that we need a profound cultural awakening. We essentially need a complete 180-degree turn in how we view human nature itself. The text outlines what this paradigm shift needs to look like. It's all about reclaiming our fundamental reproductive design and unlearning a lot of modern cultural scripts. It means viewing children as the absolute future, rather than a financial or personal burden. It means seeing families as the unshakable foundation of society, not just restrictive inconveniences. And ultimately, it means understanding that creating a human legacy is the whole point of our continuity, not just some optional luxury. The author presents us with a final, incredibly stark duality here. On one hand, we can continue rebelling against our biological design, a path the book warns will lead straight to extinction and a stillborn world. Or, on the other hand, we can choose to reclaim that design, which ensures survival, generational continuity, and building a legacy that's actually worthy of passing on to the next generation. So what's it going to be? Will we continue to rebel against our design, or will we reclaim the sacredness of life? As you think about how this all ties together, the culture, the technology, the biology, and how it advances the book's larger thesis, I really encourage you to dive deeper into these ideas. Head on over to the interactive companion site at pervertingourreproductivenature.com to support the author and learn more.